Welcome to the Free Speech Iceberg. Today we are exploring the absolutely bonkers world of Supreme Court cases, which have set the legal standards for what constitutes free expression in the United States. Here in America, we take our freedom seriously, but that does not mean these cases are boring. If you're new to the Iceberg format, here's the deal. We're going to start with well-known free speech cases, the ones that have defined our popular understanding of our rights and limitations, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, what's visible on the surface. As we get deeper, it'll get weirder, darker, and more obscure, until the final level of the iceberg where we'll discuss the stuff you're definitely not learning about in high school civics class. If you're a constitutional lawyer, forgive me in advance for leaving out something you find interesting or important. Inevitably, an abridged iceberg will leave out many things, but I did consult Thomas Berry, director of the Robert A. Levy Center for Constitutional Studies at Cato. Thank you so much for your help, Thomas. And as a disclaimer, if you disagree with me or the Supreme Court, feel free to test the limits of your free speech in the comments below, or you could just say something nice. The past 10 years, we have seen so many attacks on freedom of expression, but as you'll learn in this video, these attacks are nothing new. Tier 1, the stuff you know. Tier 1 is reserved for the icons, the legends, and the first case is absolutely that. Texas v. Johnson, 1989. This is the flag burning case. Despite it being constitutionally protected, politicians will never stop trying to ban it. I'm looking at you, Donald Trump, and Hillary Clinton. Who knew flag burning was such a bipartisan issue? Texas v. Johnson revolved around a man named Gregory Lee Johnson, also known as Joey for some reason. Joey was a member of the Revolutionary Communist Party, which was holding a protest at the RNC in Dallas, Texas. And at some point, Joey J was handed the American flag, doused it with kerosene, and lit her on fire, shouting, "America, the red, white, and blue, we spit on you. I've heard better chants." Joey was given a year-long sentence in prison and a $2,000 fine before his lawyers took his case all the way to the Supreme Court, which decided 5-4 that flag burning was, in fact, protected by the First Amendment. Even conservative icon Justice Scalia voted with the majority on this case.
We have a First Amendment. The right of free speech shall not be abridged, in particular to speech critical of the government. I mean, that was the main kind of speech that tyrants would seek to suppress. Burning a flag is a symbol that expresses an idea. I hate the government is unjust, whatever.
God bless America. As of 2016, Joey J was still out there burning flags. Our next Supreme Court case is equally as iconic due to its controversy. Citizens United versus FEC 2010. In 2002, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act said corporations were not allowed to spend money on electioneering communications within a certain window of time before an election. But in 2008, Citizens United said, nah, I'm gonna do what I want. This conservative nonprofit created a movie called Hillary the Movie, because of course that's the name, and wanted to advertise it within a restricted time window. They got taken to court by the FEC, but on their appeal, the Supreme Court ruled that this restriction violated freedom of speech. Now, a lot of people have a problem with this ruling because one, it declared that corporations have the same rights as individuals to speak freely and at whatever time they choose, and two, political spending on something like a documentary counts as speech. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Our next case is Tinker versus Des Moines, 1969. You may not know the name of this case, but you have definitely felt the implications. A group of young students in Des Moines, Iowa showed up to their public school wearing black armbands in protest of the Vietnam War. That war is going to come up a lot in this video. The little revolutionaries got suspended, but their parents weren't about to let that suspension fly. So they sued the school, and eventually the Supreme Court ruled 7-2 that you can't restrict a student's free speech simply on the basis that it may disrupt the learning environment. This is where we got the famous line that neither the students nor teachers, quote, shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. This was a huge moment for students' free speech rights. Our next and final case on the tip of the iceberg came only 2 years later in 1971. The New York Times v. the United States. This is one of the most significant prior restraint cases in US history. Daniel Ellsberg was working on a report for the Department of Defense in the late 60s on the United States' role in Vietnam and Indochina. By the time the project was over, Ellsberg had thousands of pages of classified materials and a conviction that the public must know what he now knew. He sent photographs of the documents, which would become known as the Pentagon Papers, to journalists at the New York Times and Washington Post. These papers revealed the US had systematically and deliberately misled the public about its involvement in the Vietnam War, and that American leaders had secretly expanded the conflict while downplaying its severity. But soon, the New York Times received an order from the US government to completely cease publishing the documents for national security reasons. The Supreme Court ruled that in this case, you can't just say security threat to protect yourself from criticism. The Pentagon Papers were a turning point. They revealed the government had hidden its involvement in Vietnam from the public for years prior to the war and worsened public sentiment. The next tier of our iceberg is floating just below the surface. Maybe you didn't learn about it in class, but if you're a casual free speech enjoyer, you may be familiar. Tier 2, shallow waters. The first case is especially relevant in today's political climate. Brandenburg v. Ohio, 1969. What do you think happens when a Ku Klux Klan member at a rally says this? "We're not a revengeful organization, but if our president, our Congress, our Supreme Court continues to suppress the white Caucasian race, it's possible that there may have to be some revengeance taken." Is that a call to violence? Is that allowable under the First Amendment? The answer to this question would create the Brandenburg test, a precedent that states inflammatory speech must satisfy two criteria if it's to be penalized. One, it must be directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action, and two, it is likely to incite or produce such action. I have a feeling the Brandenburg test will appear quite a lot in the coming years as we try to root out political violence in this country, whose speech is actually threatening and whose isn't. And if you're wondering, the court ruled entirely in Brandenburg's favor. This ruling essentially overturned the precedent established by Schenck versus the United States back in 1919, when socialists were arrested for circulating anti-draft pamphlets in violation of the Espionage Act. You may be familiar with that case for its connection to the famous and incorrect saying, "You can't shout fire in a crowded theater." Reason Magazine has a great article on why this is not true, which you can find in the description box alongside all of my sources. And speaking of the draft, our next case involves a man wearing a jacket to a courthouse in California that read, "Fuck the draft." A real Melania moment, if you will. Cohen v. California, 1971. In 1968, Paul Robert Cohen was only 19 years old. With the Vietnam War raging in the background and the persistent threat of the draft picking him up and placing him in imminent danger, he did what many other young men did at the time. He protested. He showed up to testify at an unrelated court case one day, wearing the words on his back, and was promptly arrested for disturbing the peace. When the case was taken up to the Supreme Court, they ruled 5-4 that the state couldn't regulate speech simply because it found the words vulgar, and this did not constitute a direct personal insult. Justice Harlan wrote, "One man's vulgarity is another's lyric." So true. The court has consistently upheld the right to be offensive, and our next case really solidifies that. Snyder v. Phelps, 2011. It's a case that involves none other than the infamous Westboro Baptist Church.
God duped you.
As a teenager, I remember watching in horror as these people protested military funerals with extremely insensitive signs, which is exactly what took them all the way up to the Supreme Court. The funeral was being held for Marine Lance Corporal Matthew Snyder, who was killed in the line of duty in Iraq. The signs included the phrases, "Thank God for dead soldiers," their favorite F word, "Doom Nations," "America is doomed," and "You're going to hell." Snyder's father decided to sue for intentional infliction of emotional distress, among other things, but the Supreme Court found that the protests pertained to matters of public interest, which is protected by the First Amendment. Our next case has to do with defamation. Is it okay for a paper to publish false information about someone? It's called New York Times versus Sullivan, 1964. We all know about the Times, but who the heck is Sullivan?
Is that Sullivan? Sully? Bro, no way! No way, Sully. Babe, I gotta say what up to Sullivan.
Public Safety Commissioner L.B. Sullivan of Montgomery, Alabama, sued the New York Times for libel. What did they do? Well, they published a full-page ad containing several inaccuracies about MLK's arrests and the behavior of police officers in Montgomery, which LB found reflected poorly on him. But the court found that the New York Times acted more in negligence than in malice. Basically, in order for someone to be held liable for libel or defamation, they have to actually know they're lying and do so intentionally. This case has gained prominence, especially as of late, in response to accusations and lawsuits pertaining to falsehoods and potentially defamatory statements published by large media outlets. Our next case on this level of the iceberg is one of the most consequential of the digital age. Moody versus NetChoice 2024. Can a social media platform censor politicians? More significantly, can the government prevent them from doing it? In this case, NetChoice, an association of several social media and internet companies, sued the state of Florida's enforcement officials for a law which would have required large sites to stop deplatforming political candidates and disclose their content moderation policies. The court found this violated the First Amendment rights of the companies within NetChoice by restricting editorial judgment. Essentially, these companies don't have to host opinions and voices they disagree with.
I don't like it! I don't like to think about it!
Luckily, all conservatives needed to stop getting censored online was for the world's richest man to buy the town square and make it an open forum. I'm glad that one worked out. Our last case on this level set the legal precedent against jawboning. Bantam Books v. Sullivan, 1963. Rhode Island had set up the Commission to Encourage Morality in Youth, which threatened book distributors they deemed to be selling objectionable publications. This was deemed unconstitutional because there was an implied threat of legal action, which made it a system of informal censorship. It's like the government acting as a mob boss.
I don't wanna do your dirty work.
Jawboning is extremely relevant today, both with the FCC commissioner appearing to threaten ABC with legal action if they didn't remove Jimmy Kimmel.
Frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
It's right out of Goodfellas. That's right out of a mafioso coming into a bar going, "Nice bar you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it."
And with the Biden administration's pressure on social media companies to remove posts about COVID and the Hunter Biden laptop story. Tier 3, going deeper. Welcome, my friends, to Tier 3. It is unlikely a layperson knows about these cases, but they are pretty juicy, and this first one is a doozy. Chaplinsky v. New Hampshire, 1942. We're going all the way back with some 1942 concerns and precedents. A Jehovah's Witness was distributing pamphlets on a public sidewalk when a crowd gathered. He then called an officer a racketeer and a damned fascist. He contested this arrest at the Supreme Court, but the court unanimously agreed that Chaplinsky's words constituted fighting words. Strangely enough, this ruling has never officially been overturned. Only its precedent has been greatly restricted over the years with cases like Cohen v. California and another case we'll talk about later in this video. But no conviction has been upheld by the Supreme Court under the fighting words doctrine since Chaplinsky. Our next case really should be more well known, but we are unfortunately losing the ancient texts. The FCC versus Pacifica Foundation, 1978. Also known as the 7 Dirty Words. George Carlin, an iconic comedian, really someone who understood that a comedian's job is to push the boundaries, recorded possibly his most famous broadcast called Filthy Words. Take a listen.
And I was thinking one night about the words you couldn't say on the public airwaves. The ones you definitely couldn't say, ever. The original 7 words were shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits. Those are the ones that'll curve your spine, grow hair on your hands, and...
Now, I know.
How dare you?
Censor his words in a free speech video. I'm making a point. The FCC shut his ass down. The Pacifica Foundation radio station broadcast this monologue of his with a warning for listeners, but one man had to complain that his kid overheard it. And the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the FCC. This ruling created the framework for the FCC to restrict traditional broadcast media, while cable and subscription services enjoy broader First Amendment protections, a distinction that continues to shape media regulation today. But it also certified George Carlin as a legend, so... Our next case takes us back to 1923, Gitlow v. New York. Can the state level government unconstitutionally regulate your speech? We know they can't now, but back in the day, First Amendment protections only applied to abuses from the national government. It wasn't until a socialist named Benjamin Gitlow was arrested and convicted for handing out his left-wing manifesto, which advocated for the overthrow of the government by any means necessary, that the Supreme Court decided that federal First Amendment protections also applied at the state level. But they upheld Gitlow's conviction as a criminal anarchist, so win for us, L for him. Our next case is Skokie v. National Socialist Party, 1977. Does the First Amendment protect a Nazi's right to gather and march with his fellow Nazis through a majority Jewish town?
Oh boy.
Apparently so. Skokie, Illinois was a town with a population of 70,000 people, 45,000 of whom were Jewish, many of them who were survivors of concentration camps.
Don't be stupid, be a smarty. Come and join the Nazi party.
One day, the police chief of Skokie gets a call from Frank Collin, who tells him that 40 to 50 of his guys are going to march single file in front of the village hall wearing Nazi uniforms and swastika armbands. When Collin got the news that Skokie was filing a lawsuit to block the protest, he called up the ACLU and took them all the way up to the Supreme Court. There it was decided that the First Amendment does, in fact, protect even the most offensive speech. Tier 4, the deep cuts. We're gonna get into some weird and occasionally upsetting territory here, and our first case certainly fits the bill. RAV versus the city of St. Paul, Missouri, 1992. One night while hanging out with his buddies, our plaintiff, RAV, decided to do something unthinkable. He fashioned a makeshift cross and lit it on fire in front of a black neighbor's house. RAV was charged under a local bias law that prohibited the display of any symbol which, quote, aroused anger, alarm, or resentment in others on the basis of race, color, creed, religion, or gender. Now, walk with me here. The Supreme Court decided unanimously to rule this local ordinance unconstitutional because it regulated the speech based on who the subjects were. Essentially, this was a content-based ordinance, and the rules didn't apply equally based on who the hater was hating.
Hate us because they ain't us.
That's not what it is.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. They hate us because we is us. They don't hate us because they ain't us.
They
don't hate us because
I'm
they ain't
used
us.
to it. They hate us because they
Stop it.
ain't us. 'Cause they ain't us.
Stop it. Don't say it again.
That one's bound to be controversial. Moving on. Our next case is Morse versus Frederick, 2007, also known as the Bong Hits for Jesus case. Can you stand outside a high school event as Joseph Frederick, a senior at Juneau Douglas High School, did on that fateful day in 2002, holding a sign that says, Bong Hits for Jesus? Apparently not. The school can suspend you and restrict your speech if you are advocating for drug use, and to do it in Jesus' name. SMH, man. In our next case, we're getting controversial again. I'm sorry. What did you think the Iceberg video was gonna be? Reno versus ACLU, 1997. In 1996, the Communications Decency Act was signed into law. It was designed to protect minors from being exposed to indecent and patently offensive communications. Fair. But according to the ACLU, they challenged the law because, quote, the censorship provisions would criminalize expression protected by the First Amendment, and because the terms indecency and patently offensive are unconstitutionally overbroad and vague. Websites were distinguished from radio broadcasting, like in George Carlin's case, because people typically know what websites they're clicking on, and parental controls can be set up to keep their children safe. My personal opinion is that the internet is not safe for children at all, and I say that as someone who grew up on the internet. Our next case has to do with license plates and Confederate memorabilia. Walker versus Texas Division, Sons of Confederate Veterans, 2015. The year was 2009. Our country was enduring the worst financial crash since the Great Depression, but we had more important issues on our hands. The Sons of Confederate Veterans were denied the ability to have their Confederate flag designs featured on a Texas license plate because some people found it offensive. They took it all the way to the Supreme Court. I'll make a long story short, they never did get those license plates. The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that license plates count as government speech, and therefore the government can refuse to use a design. Better luck with bumper stickers. And that concludes our fourth tier. Tier 5, the point of no return. I feel like I need dim lighting and a spooky flashlight. In this tier, we have some crazy shit to talk about. Case 1 is actually more lighthearted and kind of funny. Mattel vs. Tam 2017. So this Asian rock group called The Slants went to get their name trademarked, only to find out they couldn't because their name was a slur for Asian people. I didn't even know this word was a slur for Asian people, and I do not want to hear it in the comments for saying the name of the band. Their name violated the disparagement clause of the Lanham Act of 1946, which prohibits trademarks that, quote, disparage or bring into contempt or disrepute any persons living or dead. The Supreme Court overturned this clause and the rock band got to trademark their name. Our next case happened around the same time, Alanis versus United States 2015. Anthony Alanis had been left by his wife and went on an Eminem-style crash out on his Facebook under the rapper name Tone Dougie. He posted about kidnapping his wife, shooting up an elementary school, and all other sorts of heinous things about his coworkers and police officers. In many of these posts he commented, "This is not a threat."
If you want to stop me, you're gonna have to
Tone Dougie.
kill me!
This is not a threat.
And in court, he defended himself by saying he never intended to threaten anyone, and this was just his artistic expression as an aspiring rapper. Okay, she and Eminem, whatever you say. It may come as a surprise to you that the Supreme Court actually overturned his conviction and held that someone must have intent behind their threats for it to be a criminal act. United States versus Stevens 2010. Robert Stevens was a Pennsylvania man running a dog breeding business, but on the side, he sold videos online of his pit bulls fighting each other. For this, he was convicted under 18 USC Section 48, a law intended to prevent the sale of animal torture videos. But Stevens challenged this conviction and claimed the law violated his First Amendment rights. And the Supreme Court agreed. The law, in their opinion, was too vague and did not apply to any of the existing exceptions to the First Amendment, and they would not be carving out a new one. The law failed to pass strict scrutiny. In this case, there are a number of examples which could be convicted under the law that would be considered unconstitutional. And the court essentially said the behavior depicted in the videos could be criminalized, but not the videos themselves. In my opinion, this is the most controversial Supreme Court case I read about, but let me know what you think in the comments. Let's end this video on a more lighthearted note. Falwell versus Hustler. If you know these names, you may suspect where this is going. Jerry Falwell, a famous fundamentalist Christian pastor and founder of Liberty University, sued the crap out of Hustler and lost. Imagine you are Jerry Falwell. You get a call one day. Hey, check out the new Hustler. Don't ask why. You find one, flip through it, and see a crude parody of a Campari ad claiming you had drunken relations with your mother in an outhouse. Sorry, I'm suing. I would do exactly what he did, even though he didn't win. The courts decided that public figures can be satirized in this way, and it didn't count as libel or defamation or any of the other things he was suing for, but I think we can all understand where he was coming from. Sorry, Jerry.
None of us like that. I don't like to be told.
And with that concludes our free speech iceberg. I could probably make a second video exploring even more court cases like these because there are just so many interesting free speech cases. Let me know in the comments below what you think I missed. And over the years, we've really seen our limits tested and clarified by some wacky and sometimes disturbing individuals. But ultimately, I am so grateful we have the freedom to express ourselves and speak our minds because we are seeing what happens when countries don't guarantee those freedoms. I'm looking at you, Great Britain. Anyways, before you head out, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and hype this video if you really want to help a smaller channel. I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you all next time. Ciao.